everybody, Yankee here. You know, I've tried over the years to make one of the tenets of my channel that we need to be more inclusive in the gun community. We need to start welcoming in new people. We need to stop gatekeeping. We need to stop the division and the fear-mongering and all those things that are forcing more and more people away from the Second Amendment. We need to stop that. Unfortunately, that's where the big money is, so I'm fighting a losing battle there. But still, it's something I've stuck to for years. Not really working out for me, but I've stuck to it, and I'm going to stick to it. So I do believe we need to stop the gatekeeping. We need to stop trying to say, oh, do they have the right politics to be in the Second Amendment community? Do they have the right religion? Do they have the right this and that? Stop it. We're creating more enemies, not winning people over. And that's not how we keep our Second Amendment rights. That's how we force a constitutional amendment eventually when public sentiment turns enough to actually change it. Because right now the politicians would change it in a minute. Because the billionaires that own them want the Second Amendment gone. They want the First Amendment gone. And once the Second Amendment's gone, the First Amendment would be easier to take away. And unfortunately, you got people on the right now that are actually supporting that. You got people on the right saying things like, well, trannies shouldn't have guns. You know, Second Amendment doesn't apply to them. Or, oh, I'm okay with government censorship. We got people defending stuff on the right that I never thought I'd see, and it's sad. And I've said this for a long time. We need to stop this divisive bullshit because all it does is lead to alienating more people, and it even warps the minds of the people that are already in the gun community. They start to believe the radical stuff. So it needs to stop. But because of this position, I've had a couple of people over the last few days ask me, hey, don't you think it's awful that Vice President Vance came out and said that we shouldn't be doing anything to compromise with or find common ground with the radical left? Don't I think that's too divisive? And politics shouldn't be about division. Politicians, especially our president and vice president, shouldn't be divisive. They should be trying to bring people together in times of strife and trouble. And that latter part, you kind of have a point. Yes, it should be the job of the politicians, the president and vice president especially, to try to bring people together, not sow division, but that's the times we live in. And as far as do I agree with what he's saying, well, unfortunately, I actually do agree with what he's saying. So the people that think I'm going to say, no, we need to try to be compromising with and find a common ground with the radical left, well, you're wrong, because we can't. First off, I'm not going to compromise with them, because compromise with the radical left would be nothing short of total surrender of our Second Amendment rights and probably our First Amendment rights. Because they're just trying to enforce their own leftist version of fascism on America to make people live the way they want you to live. So I'm not compromising with them. In fact, I'm not compromising with anyone on the Second Amendment. I've always said if you want to change the Second Amendment, amend the Constitution. Otherwise, shut up. You've got a means to change it. If you can't do it, that means you're wrong. So, no, I'm not going to compromise with the radical left as far as gun rights are concerned. I'm also not going to try to find common ground with them because here's the thing. They're awful. Like I said, they're a bunch of fascists, left-wing fascists. Just like the people on the far radical right are right-wing fascists. They're not reasonable people. I don't want to be an unreasonable person, so I don't want to find common ground with them. Like I said, you can't compromise with either one because the left, I've already said what they want, and the right is basically the same except just enforce religion instead of, whatever it is the left believes in. It'd be religious fascism. White nationalism, all that stuff. I don't want to have anything in common with either of those extremes. Now, luckily, they're only like about 5%, and that's being generous on both ends. So that's 5% of the people on both ends you're not going to find anything in common with. 10% of the people total. That still leaves 90% of the people. And those people in the middle that either lean left or lean right, or like most of us actually kind of have mixed opinions, but we choose which ones are most important to us, and that means we lean that way or the other way. But most of us are in that middle area, and here's the thing. No matter where you are in that left of center group or right of center group, you still have more in common with every other person in that 90% group than you do the radicals on either end. If it's a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the radical left, 10 being the radical right, and everybody else is in between, well, 2s have more in common with 8s, and 9s have more in common with 3s than they do with the 1 or the 10. Because those people are nut jobs, extremists, radicals. Most of us aren't that. So we shouldn't try to find common ground with them. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to say don't reach out to them. Neo-Nazis can reform. Radical leftists can reform. They can mature. They can get smarter. They can decide they were wrong. So I will always reach out to them. Doesn't mean I'm going to try to find common ground with them. If someone does heinous things, I'm not going to support those heinous things or try to find a common ground with those heinous things. I'm going to try to get them to quit doing those heinous things. So we can still reach out to the radical right and the radical left. But they don't represent any of us, especially those of us in the middle. And like I said, if you're in that 90%, you've got more in common with every other person in that 90% than you do either extreme. Like I said, even if you lean to the far end of the right side of that 90%, you still don't have anything in common with the radical right. You have some ideas you both support, but they do it to a crazy extreme that you're not going to be able to support. Same thing with the left. If you're all the way to the left of center, as far as you can go without becoming a radical, you still have more in common with that far right guy than you do that radical leftist, because they're going to take everything to an extreme that you and I and any reasonable person can't support. So no, I do not think we can ever find common ground with the radical left or the radical right. If you can, you might want to think to yourself, oh, that's a character flaw. I mean, we all do it. We hear somebody say something extreme and we're like, yeah. But then we think about it and we're like, wait, no, that's got some pretty bad implications. I let my lizard brain think first. And we become better people by saying, hey, I'm not going to be that way. And I think, like I said, the right and left can do that, but they've been so indoctrinated into the lifestyle they're in, it's going to be hard. And I definitely don't want to try to find common ground with them, because like I said, that makes us lesser if we do. And as far as compromise, not compromising with anyone on the Second Amendment. So as far as what J.D. Vance said, it's true. Now, he should have added the radical right, but he wouldn't do that because he's catering to the radical right. Doesn't want to lose that sliver of the vote, even though it's only 5% in a country that they've created a massive division right down the middle. And it's orchestrated to do that. They need the radicals on both ends. That's why they cater to the radicals on both ends. Because they're going to get a certain amount of people from the people in the middle, probably half. And they got to get their radicals, their 5% radicals, or they're going to have to get more out of the middle. And they can't get more out of the middle without, bringing people together. So they still have to cater to those radicals. But we as citizens, as the 90%, no, we shouldn't be trying to find common ground with either of them on anything. We shouldn't be compromising with either of them on anything. They're not going to accept compromise. Like I said, we can still reach out to them and hope they see the error of their ways. But no, we're not going to find common ground with the radical left on gun rights, and we shouldn't even try. Because like I said, they won't accept anything other than full surrender of our gun rights, which would lead to us losing lots of other rights, because remember, the second protects the other ones. So no, I don't think he was wrong in what he said. Should he have said it? Probably not. Should he have included the right if he did say it? Probably so. But like I said, most of us don't have to worry about the radical right or the radical left because we'll never be part of them. We have nothing in common with them, and we definitely shouldn't compromise with them.